Hi, I'm Alan Coffey, and I'm driven to know. Today, we'll explore why all information is not created equal. I'm also running a fundraiser for my PayPal account, so if you'd like to contribute to that, I would appreciate it. And also, I'd like to point out that our production here at Driven to Know is an evolving process. We have not yet reached perfection in doing our videos, but we're trying to do the best we can with the equipment we have. All information is not created equal. We live in a world where information is immediately accessible through our smartphones, tablets, laptops, desktops, and this is a good thing. But as good as it is, immediate access is problematic because it requires that we examine the source and quality of the information we find. We have to understand, is it factual, is it useful, is it biased, is it innocently biased, or is it deliberately and maliciously deceitful? And is it something that we can actually use? Is it something that describes and explains the events or ideas it claims to? And how can we tell? What are the obstacles to determining its truth or falsehood? And these are all questions that must be answered satisfactorily if we are to be truly driven to know. All information is not created equal. If I were feeling bold, I would state that this is self-evident. However, with the number of conspiracy theories and pseudo-scientific theories and practices out there, not to mention fortune tellers, psychics, and a bunch of other stuff that's believed by far too many people, I can't be that bold. Far too often, bad information is not self-evident to far too many people. And why is that, you ask? Several reasons come to mind. The first one is the human brain. The second one is bad sources of information masquerading as good sources of information. And then the other is the malicious intentions of con men, grifters, and other persons out to deceive for fun and political gain or profit, or sometimes all three. We're going to talk about the human brain a little bit. The human brain contains not only the latest versions of primate evolution, it also has structures that began with our reptilian ancestors millions and millions of years ago. These brain structures that go all the way back to the days of reptile are there because evolution reuses and builds on the structures that are already present. It seldom brings utterly revolutionary organs or brand spanking new systems into being. Its processes work on what's already there. And this results in organs that accomplish the necessary adaptations, but not much more. The perfect brain does not result from evolution, but the brain that meets the environmental requirements for us does. This makes our brain prone to thought errors and misapprehensions about our environment and the causes of phenomenon and events in it. It often makes logical, critical thinking difficult because it hides the real nature of many natural phenomenon and natural events. There are 4 flaws in our natural modes of thought. The first one is confirmation bias. There's storytelling, agentivity, and tribalism. These are all things that are wired into the way our brains interpret the world around us. They are part of our natural way of seeing and thinking about ourselves and everything we come into contact with. They can cause us to believe bad information. Now we need to understand that these habits of mind evolved because they were useful in our survival in a primitive state. However, in our modern scientific world, they are oftentimes less useful and sometimes even harmful. And this is because they were designed for a time when uncertainty was much more prevalent in our world than it is now. For instance, confirmation bias means that we want to believe and trust information that agrees with what we already believe. We're not going to want to believe things that contradict ideas that we have believed for a long time. In other words, if I don't trust the government, I'm not going to believe anybody who tells me the government's a good thing. Even if they provide me with evidence, facts that can be verified, I'm not going to add that to my repertoire of understanding about the government. Agenticity is another aspect of thinking that says that because we are independent agents in the world and we make choices about how things are going to happen around us, that there are other people or beings in the world that do the same thing. For instance, used to people believe, well, not used to, there are still people who believe that trees and rocks and birds and animals all have these spirits that operate them from the outside, and that these are agents that make things happen. So agenticity makes us believe that there are larger forces in the world that are operating behind our back and beyond our control. And this is one of the sources of conspiracy theories. We think that certain events cannot be happening without someone guiding these things into fruition. To add to the whole idea of conspiracy theories, we tell ourselves stories. And we do that to explain the world around us and to give ourselves purpose and meaning. Because the world is a confusing place. Things happen that have no apparent and immediate purpose to them. Things happen that we don't understand why they're happening that way. And when we tell ourselves a story, we provide a way to give ourselves meaning by a beginning, middle, and an end or conclusion. And usually the end or the conclusion reveals the purpose of the story. This is another part of the whole conspiracy theory package. We tell ourselves stories, and sometimes that story is, well, this just didn't happen by happenstance or accident. Someone planned this and did this. Now let's kick that up a level. We get things like people who believe that the coronavirus that causes COVID-19 is somehow or another a government conspiracy to take away our freedom because it makes us wear masks and the government locks everything down, and so consequently the government has a conspiracy against us by releasing the coronavirus into the world. And some people who believe that conspiracy theories will say the coronavirus is a hoax, it's not as bad as it is claimed to be, things like that. The stories that we tell ourselves will often be the basis of the conspiracy theories that we believe. Because in our stories, we are the protagonist, we're the hero, we're the main character. You know, every day of our life is a new story that we tell ourselves. And we want to hear other people's stories as well. So naturally, in confusing times, the persons, or group who tell the simplest and most compelling story that explains what is really happening will gain the most followers, whether it's true or not, because our brains crave order, and they crave the order specifically of a story that has a beginning, a middle, and a conclusion. It's one of the reasons why when you watch a movie or a television show, like say the ending of The Sopranos, where they just kind of fade to black and you don't know what happens to Tony Soprano and his family, those are not very satisfying because they defy the convention of a story. And reality is like that. A lot of times we don't get real closure in the real world, so we'll generate a story that brings closure even though there is no closure. And conspiracy theories do this on steroids. We don't understand why COVID-19 is here. So people come up with a conspiracy theory, a story that explains, and the person who has the most compelling story that's the simplest and most direct explanation of whatever the phenomenon is, generally that's the person who wins. The other thing we have to worry about is tribalism, Because if we buy into only the information that agrees with what we already believe, we buy into agentivity, that there are people out there who are controlling us and our circumstances. We buy into the power of stories, and we build a conspiracy theory on that. We're going to become tribal, because our tribe is the group that is most like us. It's usually based on our family, our community, or other close, strong bond that we have. And in times of stress, we naturally gravitate to this position, because we tend to trust people that we already, quote, know over those who we don't know and who are different than us. This in large part explains a lot of the rhetoric you hear in politics these days, where people are literally saying that one group is demonically controlled by, who controls demons? The devil. Tribalism brings that out. And when these mental habits are in control, when these natural habits of thinking take over our thought processes, it's impossible to think critically about ourselves and the world around us. It's difficult and nearly impossible, because the hardwired mental tools that we have engage automatically, whereas the tools of critical thinking have to be learned. If we're going to look at the world through objective perspective that's informed by fact, we have to learn how to do that, because that's not naturally how our mind operates. Our mind operates in an entirely different way. What I have learned is that without a commitment to critical thinking over these flawed habits of mind, it's impossible to truly be driven to know. Oh, we may be interested in knowing things, and we may be even obsessed and driven to know these things, but we don't have any way to evaluate them. We don't have any way to understand what is really true and what isn't true. It's impossible for us to truly be driven to know. Now, this is only the first part of a number of videos about the quality of information that we find. Because if we don't have quality information, we're not going to be able to think critically about anything, because you have to have true information, factual information, to think about factual perspectives on the world. So I hope you've enjoyed our video for today. If so, please like and subscribe. Also, if I'm going to pay the bills, please support me on PayPal in the links below. That's it for today. I'm AT Coffee, and I'm driven to know, and you can be driven to know too.